weather map right now, a lot of it tied to tropics, and right now, bullseye right here with the heavy rain. So one of the big stories that we're covering for you on this Saturday morning, the remnants of our tropical storm, meanwhile also the threat for severe weather. So we'll take a look at the timing, and all of this heavy rain will be in place. So a big flash flood threat, flooding threat as well, including rivers and streams. So we'll take a look at that. And obviously a huge amount of activity in the tropics from the Pacific, obviously into the Atlantic. It is awake. We have some invest areas. We have a tropical depression and another tropical storm, Helene, along with Florence, that we have our eyes set on right now. So we want to get you the latest on what we know. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper has declared a state of emergency ahead of any possible effects from follow at ReadyGov and hashtag prepare now. And that's exactly what we want everyone to do right now, because Dr. Erika Navarro, you're here. We have the luxury of time still, but we're starting to see an important window close on Florence.
Yeah, and that window of preparation also is closing as we head forward in time here. Florence is expected to bring potential direct impacts to the U.S. next week, likely Wednesday or Thursday. But things are already starting to pick up in terms of the large swells and the rip currents to make those impacts, to prepare for the storm.
But I like what you say. You can't do the city-specific yet. We have to talk about regions, and that's important because a huge area of impact, and it's not just the direct landfall that we're concerned about too. We have a rain factor with this system that we're going to be watching very closely as well. And we've already seen some significant flash flooding due to showers and thunderstorms in the last 24 hours in places that don't need it. So when you look at this map, it's not surprising how wet it has been year to date in so many places, including Baltimore, 45 inches of rain so far this year. You also see some big rain totals from West Virginia to Kentucky and into Tennessee. But when you look at the soil moisture, another component, another factor going into how much of a flash flood risk are we looking at, it is a bullseye in those areas from Harrisburg, D.C., Richmond, all of those places that have been in the news recently because of all of the rainfall. Now, when you look at this, I know it looks like a rainfall QPF map, but this is rain needed to flood. So what you see as the yellows and the oranges actually correspond to lower numbers. So less rainfall needed to flash flood, but you still have those spots where it does not take much to create some flash flooding. Absolutely concerned about the flash flood threat here, because 1 to 2 inches of rainfall, not out of the question. This is aside from what Florence might bring as we get into the next couple days. We're talking about a front and Gordon at this point, providing some of that deep tropical moisture and that flash flood concern. But Florence will add to it, we do think, once we figure out where that main impact point is going to be and then where the remnants go beyond that. But we have to watch Florence's tropical moisture as part of the flash flood risk coming up. Well, the tropics playing a role in that high potential, as we talked about in the Ohio River Valley, the remnants of Gordon and a cold front teaming up to drop that heavy rain. Indianapolis, some of the big cities under the gun. Cincinnati got an early shot of those problems as rising water stranded drivers. So we have, again, that high risk for some flash flooding in that area, in orange especially, but know that that's not just the only spot. As you can see, just over the last 5 days, how much rain some of these areas have picked up. That yellow indicating anywhere from 3 to 5. When you are talking about 3 to 5 inches, we've heard, 8 to 12 over a 5-day period. That might not seem like a lot, but that is sufficient. We've grown so accustomed to hearing some of these big numbers, but it really is something. So you look at the current radar, and there is a bit of a cutoff here. You have northern Indiana, northern Illinois, Chicago included there on the drier side, but heavy, steady rain swirling around through southern Illinois with the flash flood warnings. Take these seriously. We still have a lot of rain that has yet to fall in these areas, with several inches of already coming down. Clay and Richland counties out until 8:15 Central Time. Watch your drive along 50 here between Harder and into the Ohio River Valley. You've got I-70 a factor as well. The showers and thunderstorms going to be a problem along that drive. And you can see, again, some of that heaviest rainfall just to the south of Indianapolis. So the flash flood watches are up, but a huge area from Missouri on into Pennsylvania, New Jersey, parts of New York State as well. These are all areas that have accumulated a lot of rain in the last week and several inches to go. So here's the setup. We have the deep tropical moisture that's being steered to the north with that jet stream dip kind of joining forces here and squeezing out all of that moisture. That boundary is in place, not moving very much. That's always a concern where you get the opportunity to see rounds of heavy rain over the same area. And eventually we'll start to see some of that push off to the east with that tropical moisture flowing to the north. So you see the connection and connecting the dots with our tropical system, tropical moisture now flowing to the north. So Indianapolis, by lunchtime, we're seeing some of that heaviest rainfall. We have Cincinnati, Covington, Florence, all in it by dinner time, beginning to roll through between Indianapolis and Dayton with some heavy rainfall as we get towards the overnight. And you still see that I-70 corridor eventually into Charleston as well as Pittsburgh. A lot of heavy rain towards the overnight early tomorrow morning. So again, between now and tomorrow morning, very likely to see that flash flooding, but also notice the darker shade of green going all the way from Arkansas into Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Western Virginia, and northern North Carolina. And then you can see also into the parts of the Northeast as we get from Sunday morning into Monday morning, all of those areas, the possibility of some of that heavy rain leading to some big travel problems. And we know it impacts a lot of plans today, including if you are heading out for some college ball. We know that's the case in Columbus, Ohio today. Kickoff at 3:30 with the Rutgers Scarlet Knights into the Ohio State Buckeyes. Temperatures in the 60s, but you see 100% chance of all of that rainfall. All right, the agony of the heat. It is week 2 of college football. Some fans will be enjoying the game with a whisper of fall in the air, but fall has yet to find South Carolina. Meteorologist Paul Goodloe joins us live from the famously hot city of Columbia to talk about today's game between the Gamecocks and the Bulldogs and introduce our segment 100 Yards of Weather. Paul, I can see the fall foliage behind you.
Moving off the East Coast, we know that we have big swells to come just because of how strong this storm is anticipated to be. So let's take a look at the waves. They're already starting to pick up along Bermuda, and we're expecting those waves to translate to the East Coast here through the end of the weekend. You can see near the center of that circulation, the waves are in excess of 40 feet is the forecast here. 30 feet as you get closer here, but notice that outer edge as it passes off to the south of Bermuda brings potentially 15 to 20-foot swells there for most of the islands. Definitely something to look out for in terms of the waves, but we do have the rip current risk there as well to talk about. Now, as this storm approaches the U.S. early next week, we will see those waves start to spread all the way from the southeast up towards the Outer Banks and eventually off to the northeast. Again, potential 15 to 20-foot swells, and of course, this comes on top of the high tide. So this is definitely in play for potential impacts along the beaches. The rip current risk will be high as well throughout the week. You can see it extends from Florida, high risk there along the Space Coast, up into the Northeast. We have high risk here for much of the Mid-Atlantic along the Jersey Shore, up towards the Long Island Sound. So, Maria, this is a big deal because this threat does take lives. Even if they are indirect impacts, it's still something we have to watch out for.
It's always tougher to convince people of that when the sun is out and you're not seeing this raging storm. So we will continue to watch that. But you know what? We're not taking our eyes off the rest of the tropics. It is lighting up. So let's get you some of this before we dive really deep into Florence. We've got Tropical Depression 9 looking quite healthy. This would next be Isaac on the list. We have winds at 35 miles per hour, moving to the west-northwest at 5 miles per hour. So this one too expected in the forecast to strengthen to a hurricane. And you can see by Tuesday into Wednesday, a 90-mile-per-hour hurricane in the forecast. But as it gets towards early on Thursday, beginning to approach the island. So again, here too, time is a luxury, and we have time to make hurricane preps here in parts of the Caribbean. We're going to continue to, of course, have much more on the tropics coming up at 50 past. Well, nothing like being out in the rain supporting your favorite college football team, right? This was last night in Dallas. Texas Christian taking on Southern Methodist inside Gerald Ford Stadium. This was the 98th all-time meeting between the teams in series dating back to 1915. The 16th ranked TCU Horned Frogs getting the best of the Mustangs in the rain. That final score, 42-12. And we're calling it the agony of the heat. It is week 2 of college football. Many fans enjoying that game with a nice fall crisp in the air, but not so much in South Carolina. I see that warm sun shining on meteorologist Paul Goodloe joining us live from Columbia. You've got the Gamecocks against the Georgia Bulldogs. Doesn't get better than that. 5 days out. Dr. Erika Navarro is here, and Dr. Navarro, I'm getting questions now. People asking whether they should cancel plans along the southeast coast, and what can you say? You have this whole region that could be looking at that question the next couple days.
Yeah, and I think that's a very serious and appropriate question at this point in time, given what we're expecting with the forecast. Even with the uncertainty that we're suggesting, we'll have much more about Olivia as well. That's forecast spring impacts in Hawaii coming up at 50 past.
Hawaii, exactly. And then Helene. We've got a lot to cover. But we have other big stories too, including some tropical moisture. And that is that flash flood threat that we see today through tomorrow morning in parts of the Ohio Valley, Indianapolis, in that high likelihood. And we've seen it over the last 24 hours, as you can see, to Reading, Pennsylvania, parts of the mid-Atlantic yesterday. It's been a lot of rain. That has been a big story. The 5-day rainfall just in this little part of the country here, eastern Iowa into western Illinois, also into southern Wisconsin. You're talking 5-8 inches of rain over the last 5 days, and you have inches of rainfall potentially in some of these very same places. This is remnants of Gordon. You see a lot of yellow and orange on the radar. That's that heavy, steady rain. We do have some flash flood warnings that have been posted. Pay attention to these. Take these very seriously. These situations can be life-threatening. Clark, Crawford County until 8:45 Central Time. We've had a few inches of rain in that area. You can still see light to moderate rainfall in that warned area with this batch of rain poised to kind of move into that zone. So if you are seeing some flooded roadways now, turn around, don't drown, find a different route. If the road is closed or blocked off, it is done for a reason, to protect your life, your property. Columbus, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, all within the flash flood watches, including Scranton, parts of New Jersey and southern New York State. We have all of this tropical moisture being funneled in here. With that boundary kind of hung up there, you have now your train track and opportunities to see that heavy rain continue for the next several hours. And then as we get into early next week, begin to move into the northeast. There's that heavy rain for today. Watch that flash flood threat. Well, college football in its second week. Storms may put a flag impact. And one way certainly is to look at the wave forecast. And where you see the hot pinks, no surprise, close to the core of the storm, that's where we have that 20 to 30 foot wave situation. And you get towards Thursday morning, and at this point, the center of the storm may still be offshore, but you start to see the wave action. And that is certainly in the realm of possibility to see those waves propagate out from the storm as it pushes forward. So even as we get into this weekend, we have moderate rip current risk all the way from northern Florida up through the Outer Banks, coastal Virginia. High risk of rip currents, by the way, from the Jersey Shore to the Long Island beaches, even up towards some of the New England beaches, but also high between Daytona Beach and West Palm Beach. So we want to make sure everybody's aware of it. You know, when you have a nice weather, it is tough to say, you know, only go up to your knees. That's the only way to handle a high risk kind of day, but that's what we're looking at right now. And always swim near guarded beaches and pay attention to those flags. Those too are out for your safety. Along with every other impact, including along the coastline, we have inland concerns too. Flash flooding is going to be a big one. It is a big one this weekend because you have so many places year to date that have 36, almost 4 feet of rainfall for the year. And if you're wondering if that's above average, it is. And in some cases, we're looking at, you know, top 5 wettest August, top 10 wettest summers. And the soil is saturated, to say the least. So from Harrisburg, D.C., Richmond, you find yourselves in that category. So you add any amount of tropical moisture, whether in the short term or perhaps whatever Florence may bring down the pipeline, that is a problem. So looking at the rainfall needed to flood in an hour's time, what you see here, the shades of yellow and orange, that's less rain needed to cause flash flooding. You see it in some of the places that have already had big, big problems. Well, heavy rain could certainly slow down college football. Players and fans today, the remnants of former Tropical Storm Gordon playing a role in this wet weather. One spot to see storms, Columbus, Ohio. The campus of The Ohio State University is part of the area under flash flood watch as the Buckeyes prepare to kick off at Rutgers, with Rutgers. It's Christmas in September, too, you might say. Not really, but it's week 2 of college football, and there are some big matchups today as long as Mother Nature cooperates. And Paul Goodlow coming up in the days ahead. But right now, too, we want to take an opportunity with Dr. Erika Navarro. much of the focus of today's show, of course, will be on Florence, and know for sure that over the coming days it will be Florence. But we want to make sure we have our eyes and let everyone know we have our eyes on those other features.
Yeah, we definitely do. And, you know, this is what an active September looks like.
Yep.
We've got a lot of things to keep tabs on. There's a lot to talk about. So bear with us if we don't get to everything that, you know, might be affecting you or your loved ones. There's a lot happening on the maps here. As Maria mentioned, we have numerous storms. So let's go ahead and start with some of the other ones. We'll get to Florence here at the top of the hour. Matt, if you can hear me, if you can give me a little push, it doesn't look like the clicker wants to advance my matrix. But we do have Tropical Storm Helene that has come off the coast of Africa. And although it is anticipated to strengthen, you can see those intensities coming up to hurricane strength. A lot of the models, a lot of our guidance will be taking this out to sea. Of course, so that's good news. Not likely to see that one come in. Of course, things can change in the long range. But for at least right now, we're not expecting that one to make a run towards any land.
And you'll notice, too, these forecasts are 5 days now. The end of the cone is a Thursday.
Yes.
And that includes, with our Tropical Depression 9, likely going to be Isaac.
Yes. So we're keeping a very close watch on this one, because if once Isaac forms here, you can even see on the satellite very round and symmetric outflow right now that shows signs of potential strengthening. This one is taking a track due westward towards the Lesser Antilles. So absolutely a concern here for everyone into the Caribbean. A gradual strengthening is forecast as it approaches there. Maybe some factors limiting it in the near term, but that forecast for gradual strengthening is pretty clear.
Again, here too, a nice window of opportunity to start making some preparations.
Yes.
You've got that 5-day forecast right there beginning to approach some of the islands.
Yes, absolutely. And then, of course, it's not just the Atlantic that we have to talk about here. We actually have a hurricane in the eastern Pacific, which may bring impacts to Hawaii in the coming days. So talk about crazy, right? I mean, so many areas along the U.S. being impacted.
What I think is interesting, we knew that the eastern Pacific has been lit up this season. It's been quiet in the Atlantic. Now both are on fire.
Yes.
Still in the Pacific.
I guess this is what an active peak season looks like, right? This is what we could expect. So moving forward, Hurricane Olivia, it is expected to, again, bring those impacts into Hawaii in the coming days. We have the cone here moving due westward, but the good news is it likely is going to weaken from its hurricane status down towards tropical storm strength. Now, that's not to say there won't be impacts, but essentially it won't be hurricane impacts.
And you have some of those areas that were greatly impacted by Lane, including the Big Island. Have to watch for that flash flood threat. So if you take out the concern over major wind, that rainfall is still an issue.
Absolutely.
So we'll watch that one very close. But here, too, again, you're going out till Wednesday, so you have a good opportunity to keep tabs on any changes coming up.
Right. So now's the time to prepare, and the heavy rain for sure in Hawaii. But this one is no longer a tropical depression. This is Mankut, as you have said, a very healthy-looking storm on the satellite, potentially a very strong typhoon, one of the strongest to hit, potentially bring impacts towards Guam here in the last few decades. So this is a big deal. You can see the forecast here. That steady strengthening into a potential major category range here for Guam.
You would think that, kind of being way out in the Pacific, that it may not be as affected. It's experienced some pretty major storms in its history.
Yes.
So this is not terribly unusual to see a powerful hurricane coming their way.
No, definitely not. This part of the world, you want to talk about major storms, this is where we typically get them. There are the strongest, and it's just, unfortunately, they often bring those impacts to land in the Western Pacific. So everyone in Guam, make sure you're keeping a close eye on that one. That one does also look like to be a very strong storm. But of course, Maria, we have Florence. That's going to be our focus for today, because we do have a lot of those impacts, very strong impacts potentially coming for the U.S. East Coast. We do have that luxury of time here as well, as you've mentioned, to prepare. But when you're talking about this kind of forecast, this is a very serious threat. Yeah,
it's time now to think about the before, during, and after with a storm like this.
Yeah.
All right, Dr. Navarro, thank you so much.
That have passed through this point. So it's concerning, to say the least.
To say the least. We've got time, right? So we want to kind of emphasize that now is the time we want to start thinking about the before, during, and after plans. We know that after, there's going to be an inland threat, no matter what form it takes, or even if it stays offshore, there's likely to be some tropical rain associated with it. But we have a concern now with remnants of Gordon. So a lot happening here with the rain aspect. And so we want to touch on that as well. No surprise looking at this map that it has been an incredibly wet year in so many areas where you see the shades of blue. We're talking 3, almost 4 feet of rain this year in many places, and that is way above average in so many spots. So we again are looking at above or very much above average soil moisture. That is a huge component when you're talking about who's at the highest flash flood risk. It would just not take as much rain to create some flash flooding. And that's what this graphic represents. So I know you're kind of used to this being like a rainfall total forecast, and where you see the orange, it's the most. It actually corresponds to the least amount of rain needed to create some flash flooding. So flash flooding happens a lot faster with less rain in these areas. But with that said, you still have a lot of that going on in spots that have so much saturated soil. So you put that all together, and there is absolutely an increased flash flood risk. And then you throw in with what Florence could bring as we get into the end of next week, perhaps next weekend, with some of that moisture coming on, and you can see how our concerns will continue well into next week and next weekend. So the tropics absolutely playing a role in that high potential for flooding in the Ohio River Valley. As I mentioned, the remnants of Gordon bringing some problems here, and they're teaming up with that heavy rain in the region, producing that heavy rain in the region. Indianapolis, one of those cities in it. Cincinnati got an early shot of those problems as rising water stranded drivers. So take that flash flood threat very seriously. It can be life-threatening, but make good choices. If you can't see the bottom of the road, don't drive through it. It is sometimes that simple. But you can see over the last 5 days, the shades of yellow and orange from eastern Iowa into western Illinois, 3 to 5, almost 5 to 8 inches of rainfall in some of these places. Just to the south of some of those spots is where we've got the heaviest rainfall, but it's on the move. And in those spots, more is more, right? We already have some pretty saturated soil here, and heavy, steady, heavy rainfall in parts of Illinois and moving into Indiana. So you can see I-64, one of those corridors, really tough going right now. And you have I-70, kind of that line for now anyway, and to the south. So Indianapolis, Cleveland, too, under that flash flood watch. Columbus, Pittsburgh, all the way to Scranton, even Philadelphia. I know it has been rough the last couple of weeks with, it seems like every heavy rain bout, you've got the flash flooding. But that deep tropical moisture is being steered with our jet stream and that boundary, kind of keeping it in a similar zone that'll get a push off to the east here the next few days. So now we've got to talk about that tropical moisture being a part of the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast concerns too. So let's give you an idea of what the radar will look like through the day today. You have it about lunchtime from places like Indianapolis towards Evansville, Paducah too. After lunch begins to move into Louisville, Cincinnati, Florence up towards Dayton, Columbus as we get into the evening hours. Charleston too, you have a few hours of heavy rain potential here, even on into Pittsburgh. And so with heavy rain this weekend, flash flooding is a given, especially in those areas highlighted in orange. And that is going to affect travel plans, which means if you're traveling to some football games, we've got Ohio on our mind here, Columbus, Ohio, with kickoff at 3:30 with the Ohio State Buckeyes against the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Rain, 100% chance here with temperatures into the 60s. Well, obviously next weekend, Florence could be the tropical system having an impact on college football games, but this weekend, it is the heat. And our meteorologist Paul Goodlow joins us from the famously hot city of Columbia, where the Gamecocks and the Bulldogs will be facing it off today, Paul.